hate your family, renounce all your possessions. I mean, you'd be forgiven if you thought that Jesus had gotten up on the wrong side of the bed that day. And it's even worse, because Jesus says, hey, you have to take up your cross and follow me. And you and I, we're used to the idea of that expression being about crosses, being a metaphor for rough things in our lives, things that we have to bear, illnesses and things like that. That's not what Jesus is talking about at all. In Jesus' day and age, the word cross wasn't a metaphor for anything. It was the way by which Rome killed their criminals. It was an instrument of death. And so when Jesus is saying, hey, if you're going to be my disciple, I need you to pick up a cross and follow me, he's saying, you really need to be prepared to die. And so what are you going to do with this? This is like way more than some of us signed up for. You can, by the way, if you want, if you don't like the way I do this today, you can go home, look it up on YouTube. You'll find plenty of people that will soften this for you, make it a little more palatable, but it's probably not the right thing to do. And if you'll allow me, this gets rough, but there's a great ending to this. It'll help you just to keep in mind two things. The stories that Jesus includes in there about the guy building the tower and the king, those two stories about counting the cost. His point is just simply, you don't want to get into the middle of something without having figured out what you're doing at the start. And his point is very simple. He is on his way to Jerusalem. He's got this huge crowd of people following him, walking south towards Jerusalem. Jesus knows he's walking towards his death. He's walking towards what we call Holy Week. And he wants these people to realize, hey, if you're going to follow me, this is going to get rough. So he wants them to decide up front, you might as well know what's involved here. He's just being realistic. He's being polite to them. But I think the way that will most help you understand Jesus' comments about possessions and families would be to remember something else that Jesus said. It was in the Sermon on the Mount. He makes this really interesting just kind of point. He says, nobody puts new wine into old wine skins. People put new wine into new wine skins, and that's just a practical statement. You probably, like me, don't know much about wine, but what was going on in Jesus' day, you would store wine in skins, animal skins. And new wine was still fermenting. And so you would put new wine into new skins. And that leather, whatever the skin was pliable. It would stretch. And so as the wine fermented and gases were released, the skins could stretch with that. But Jesus' point was, you don't want to put new wine into old skins. You put new wine that's going to ferment and expand into old skins that have all lost their elasticity. You're asking for trouble. The skins are going to break. The old skins will break, and you'll lose not only the skins, but you will lose all the wine. And when Jesus makes this point, he's talking about discipleship. He's saying, look, you may want to, but you're not going to be able to sort of, if you will, slap Jesus on top of your life. You're not going to be able to say, oh, okay, I want to be a disciple of Jesus. All right, let me get my phone. I will put a time in the morning and a time in the evening to do short little prayer. I'll sign up for the Hallow app or something like that. And I will make sure I go to church every Sunday. That's what I'll do. But the rest of it, I'll just continue to do what I normally do. And Jesus says, no, that is not going to work. You cannot put new wine. You cannot put me into your already established life. If you're going to be a disciple, you've got to think things way differently. Renouncing possessions may be the easiest one of these examples to get your head around. If you are not a disciple, how do you think of your possessions? And money and possessions, you can do it in 2 words. It's mine. It's mine. That's the way we think of it. And we go to lots of trouble to get more possessions, and we take a lot of time to take care of our possessions, and we take a lot of time to protect our possessions because they're mine. But what if you are a disciple? It's not like you say, okay, well, all this stuff is mine, and yeah, okay, I'll give a little of it away. No, what Jesus is saying, if you want to be a disciple, you're going to change your whole attitude about possessions and money. You're going to say, oh, that's right, all this stuff came from God. I'm going to understand that all the things I have, money, possessions, time and talent, it all comes from God, and I'm just supposed to take care of it. I'm a steward of those possessions. You appreciate that as 2 radically different ways of looking at it. But if you will look at it the way Jesus wants, then all sorts of wonderful things open up. Same thing is true with the cross. No one's going to ask you and I to pick up a cross and go and literally die. But Jesus is, in many respects, asking us to die to ourselves, to live for others, to give up some of the things that we just take for granted. Like, okay, I bought it, it's mine. Jesus is saying, nope, if you're going to sign up for this, you need to be thinking way differently. That's what you need to sign on to. Because if you don't, if you try to slap a little Jesus on your life, Jesus is pretty clear, it's not going to work. But of course, this is hard. It's hard for most people to switch their attitudes about possessions, especially when every ad you and I listen to all day long today are going to be confirming to us, that's yours, that's yours. You should get more, that's yours. Jesus is the lone voice, if you will, in all of that. And we've all grown up with, my family is so important. It's number 1 in my life. And Jesus is like, sorry, no, Jesus is not. Your family is not number 1 in your life. If you're going to be my disciple, you are going to put me first above family. It's not likely to happen often, but there are going to be times when you are going to have to pick me over the family. Is it worth it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can just talk to you about my own life. There was a time in my life long ago when I was trying to do this. I had this idea of exactly the kind of life I wanted to live. I had grown up pretty poor, and I really wanted to do better than that. I wanted to have the joys, if you will, that some money would bring me, and I was pursuing that. I was looking for some acceptance, all sorts of things. And I was happy to, sort of have God tag along, because there was always sort of like an insurance policy, this thing, hey, Jesus, I'm not going to get all this right, so if you could come along and help when I need some trouble. But to put it, kind of in a humorous way, maybe the best illustration of this would be when I was going to go out on a date. I wasn't interested in taking Jesus with me on this date. I mean, it was kind of like I get ready and I say to Jesus, hey, Jesus, why don't you wait here in the apartment? I'll be gone for a couple hours. That's not what Jesus wants. He wants us to say, I am a disciple of Christ, and that affects every area of my life, including things like dating. But if I think back to that time of my life, and then really just a couple years later, when I really sort of, if you will, signed on to be a disciple, the differences are night and day. If you want the best example, go back to the possessions. We've started the capital campaign for the school, and if your attitude about your possessions is, it's mine. Well, the capital campaign is just going to be awkward and an inconvenience to you because you're going to be thinking, oh, yeah, here it is, the church after my money. And you're going to be uncomfortable with it, and you're going to get an invitation to go to a reception. You're going to be like, nope, I don't want to go because it'll be embarrassing if I don't want to give anything, and you'll just kind of try to ignore the whole thing. But if you are thinking, hey, I'm just being a steward of all this stuff that God's given me, of course you'll want to come to the reception, because you'll come and you'll learn about the school, and then you can, in an attitude of prayer, you can figure out, hey, God, I got this stuff. Do you want me to take some of my money and give it to the school? I'm not saying the answer to that's going to be yes. Maybe the Lord wants you to give the money that you normally give to other things. Maybe he doesn't want you to do something special for the school. He's got something else in mind for you. But it'll be a peaceful, wonderful little thing. You won't be upset about us doing a capital campaign. You'll be like, oh no, this is just another opportunity. I wonder if the Lord wants me to participate. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It really is put very, very well by the prayer we offered at the beginning of the Mass. Look graciously upon your beloved sons and daughters, that those who believe in Christ may receive true freedom. I look back at that time in my life where I was trying to keep Jesus off to the side. I was a slave to all sorts of stuff. It wasn't free. It was a rough life. I thought it was a life I wanted, but it wasn't a very good one. And I look at the life that happened just a few years later, and certainly what I've got now. It is comfortable. It is filled with peace. And so even though this gospel reading is challenging and it sounds crazy hard, oh, I can tell you it is absolutely worth everything you have to put into being a disciple of the Lord.